Hidden deep within the forests of Hollow Creek, Ohio, Iron Hollow Prison was once considered one of the most violent maximum security institutions in American history. Built in 1911 during the height of America's industrial expansion, the prison was originally designed to hold the state's most dangerous offenders, men considered too unstable, too violent, or too broken for ordinary penitentiaries. From the outside, Iron Hollow looked more like a forgotten Gothic fortress than a prison. Massive stone walls surrounded the compound. Rusted guard towers stood above the yard like silent grave markers. And beneath the prison itself, an underground tunnel system connected abandoned isolation wings that had been sealed off for decades. But according to former guards and surviving inmates, the real horror of Iron Hollow wasn't the building, it was the men inside. For over 70 years, Iron Hollow Prison became home to some of the most feared criminals in America: serial killers, gang executioners, prison enforcers, sadistic murderers, and violent psychopaths whose crimes were so disturbing that even experienced detectives refused to discuss them publicly. And among prisoners, one rumor spread through the cell blocks more than any other. There were monsters inside Iron Hollow, and some of them never left. Tonight, we uncover the terrifying truth behind the real monsters of Iron Hollow Prison. The prison officially opened in the winter of 1911. A series of riots overwhelmed nearby correctional facilities across Ohio. State officials wanted a prison that could isolate violent offenders far away from major cities, hidden deep in the forests outside Hollow Creek. At first, Iron Hollow was considered a modern achievement. The prison contained four massive housing blocks, underground punishment cells, solitary confinement chambers, and a restricted wing known only as D Block. But by the late 1940s, rumors of corruption and brutality had already begun spreading beyond the prison walls. Former inmates claimed guards regularly sold weapons and narcotics inside the prison. Others reported hearing screams echoing through sealed hallways late at night. Some prisoners disappeared after being transferred to isolation and were never officially seen again. By 1968, violence inside Iron Hollow had become uncontrollable. That same year, a violent prison gang known as the Hollow Brotherhood emerged inside Cell Block C. Unlike ordinary prison gangs, the Hollow Brotherhood operated like a military organization. Members followed strict rules, carried out brutal punishments, and controlled nearly every illegal operation inside the prison, including extortion, trafficking, underground gambling, and murder. And according to retired guard Thomas Ryan, the gang's influence reached far beyond the inmates themselves. Some guards feared them more than the prisoners. He later admitted during an interview in 1994, "Once the Brotherhood marked you, you were already dead." But among all the violent men who entered Iron Hollow Prison, 7 inmates became legends of fear inside the walls. The first was Victor Ross. To the public, Victor Ross appeared calm, intelligent, and unusually polite. But investigators later described him as one of the most psychologically disturbing criminals Ohio had ever seen. Before arriving at Iron Hollow 1972, Ross had been connected to a string of murders across rural counties near the Ohio River. Victims disappeared without warning. Families found abandoned homes, overturned furniture, and bloodstains, but no bodies. Detective Noah Barrett spent nearly 3 years investigating Ross, before finally arresting him after a traffic stop uncovered human remains hidden inside the trunk of his vehicle. During questioning, Ross reportedly smiled through the entire interrogation, but what terrified investigators most was what they discovered inside his farmhouse. Hidden beneath the floorboards were dozens of handwritten journals documenting years of violence in horrifying detail. Some entries described victims as experiments. Others contained sketches of prison-like cells built beneath the property. Even after entering Iron Hollow, Ross continued manipulating inmates around him. Former prisoners claimed he convinced weaker inmates to harm themselves through psychological intimidation alone. One inmate later told reporters, "Victor Ross didn't need weapons. He used people's minds against them." But even Ross feared one man inside Iron Hollow Prison, Marcus Adams, known throughout the prison as the Butcher of Hollow Creek. Marcus Adams was a towering former gang enforcer whose violence inside prison became almost impossible to control. Adams entered Iron Hollow after a triple homicide connected to organized crime in Cleveland during the early 1980s. Court records described the crime scene as so brutal that several responding officers required psychological counseling afterward. Inside prison, Adams quickly became one of the highest-ranking members of the Hollow Brotherhood. Former inmates claimed Adams personally carried out executions ordered by gang leadership. Some victims were found inside shower rooms, others disappeared completely. In 1987, a prison riot erupted after two Brotherhood members were discovered dead inside the cafeteria freezer. The violence lasted nearly 9 hours. 3 guards were hospitalized. 17 inmates were injured. And when tactical officers finally regained control of cell block C, Marcus Adams was found sitting calmly inside his cell covered in blood that investigators later confirmed did not belong to him. No one ever proved exactly what happened that night. But after the riot, even guards avoided direct eye contact with Adams. Then there was Leonard Griggs. Unlike the others, Griggs didn't rely on physical strength. He relied on fear. Nicknamed the Whisper Man by inmates, Griggs became infamous for gathering personal information about prisoners and using it to manipulate entire cell blocks. Some believed he secretly worked as an informant. Others believed he ordered murders through coded messages hidden inside prison books. By the early 1990s, multiple inmate deaths had been linked to conflicts involving Griggs, but investigators could never prove his involvement. Reporter Julia Mercer later described Griggs as the kind of man who could start violence without ever touching anyone. And according to surviving inmates, Griggs spent years building secret alliances between corrupt guards and the Hollow Brotherhood. But the most disturbing inmate may have been Samuel Valley. Before his arrest, Valley worked as a medical assistant at a private psychiatric facility outside Columbus. Co-workers described him as quiet, intelligent, and deeply isolated. Then patients began disappearing. Authorities eventually uncovered evidence linking Valley to illegal experiments involving sedatives and psychological torture inside the facility basement. The investigation horrified the entire state. Several victims survived long enough to describe dark underground rooms where they were restrained 4 days, while Valley observed them and recorded behavioral reactions. When Valley arrived at Iron Hollow Prison in 1991, inmates immediately avoided him, not because he was violent, but because he enjoyed watching suffering. Former guard Thomas Ryan later claimed Valley once sat silently for nearly 6 hours outside an inmate's cell listening to the man scream during withdrawal symptoms without saying a word. He looked fascinated, Ryan said, like he was studying an animal. But Iron Hollow's darkest years began after the arrival of Calvin Rourke. Rourke was transferred from a federal prison in 1996 after being connected to multiple murders involving prison trafficking operations across several states. Within months of arriving, Rourke expanded the Hollow Brotherhood's influence deeper into the prison than ever before. Weapons flooded the cell blocks, inmates vanished during lockdown, and entire sections of D Block became effectively controlled by gang members instead of guards. Some correctional officers quietly resigned, others accepted bribes to survive, and according to leaked reports later uncovered by journalist John Nicholas, prison officials may have deliberately hidden inmate deaths to avoid federal investigations. One report described a sealed isolation wing beneath D Block, where screams were allegedly heard during nighttime lockdowns. Another referenced unauthorized inmate punishments carried out by gang enforcers, but the documents disappeared before investigators could fully examine them. Then came Isaac Holloway. Unlike the others, Holloway became feared because nobody truly understood him. Arrested after a series of disappearances near abandoned highways across the Midwest, Holloway rarely spoke during questioning. Detectives later described him as emotionally empty, no remorse, no anger, no explanation. But after arriving at Iron Hollow, strange incidents began surrounding his cell. Inmates claimed they heard whispering late at night, even when Holloway was alone. Several prisoners requested emergency transfers after spending time near him. One inmate reportedly attacked his own cellmate after insisting Holloway had been watching him through the walls. Psychologists who interviewed Holloway later refused further sessions. One doctor allegedly wrote, "Subject displays emotional detachment beyond normal psychopathy. Even hardened inmates avoided him." But perhaps the most feared prisoner in Iron Hollow history was Adrian Kruger. Kruger arrived in 2003, already carrying a terrifying reputation from multiple violent facilities across the country. Covered in scars and heavily tattooed, Kruger quickly became known for extreme acts of violence carried out with almost no warning. During one lockdown, surveillance cameras captured Kruger attacking two Brotherhood members inside the prison laundry room, or accusing them of cooperating with guards. The footage was so disturbing that prison administrators sealed it from public release. But rumors spread anyway. Some inmates claimed Kruger wanted complete control of Iron Hollow. Others believed he was planning something far worse. Then, in October 2005, everything changed. A fire broke out inside the abandoned lower levels beneath D Block. Smoke flooded multiple wings, power systems failed, and for nearly 3 hours, prison officials lost control of large sections of the facility. When emergency crews finally entered the underground corridors, they discovered evidence of hidden cells never included on official prison blueprints. Inside some rooms were restraints, rust-covered chains, bloodstains, and walls covered in desperate messages carved by inmates over several decades. But the most horrifying discovery came at the end of the tunnel system. Human remains, multiple sets, some so old investigators struggled to identify them. The discovery triggered one of the largest prison investigations in Ohio history. Detective Clara Raymond later described the underground section as not a prison beneath a prison, but something closer to a graveyard. Federal authorities launched inquiries into decades of corruption, disappearances, and illegal punishments inside Iron Hollow. But before investigators could fully expose what happened there, much of the evidence mysteriously vanished. Files disappeared, witnesses changed statements, former guards refused interviews, and several surviving Brotherhood members were transferred without explanation. In 2008, Iron Hollow Prison officially shut down. State officials blamed structural instability and decades of violence, but locals around Hollow Creek still tell darker stories. Some claim the abandoned prison remains haunted by former inmates. Others believe hidden tunnels beneath the prison were never fully explored. Urban explorers who entered the ruins illegally reported hearing metal doors slamming deep underground, even though the prison had no electricity. One group allegedly discovered old inmate numbers scratched into basement walls beside fresh footprints leading into sealed corridors. They never returned to the prison. Today, Iron Hollow stands abandoned deep within the Ohio forests, its crumbling towers hidden beneath fog and overgrown trees. But according to former guards, the prison's darkest secrets were never truly uncovered, because inside Iron Hollow Prison, violence wasn't just part of the system, it was the system itself.